In recent years, China has made very rapid advancements in AI appliances. How do you think these developments will offer valuable lessons for other developing countries?
Many people, I think, in the global north may still perceive China as some sort of developing economy, and I think they would be surprised at just how developed in terms of technology and in terms of education Chinese society is. I think one of the interesting things about China is that in many ways it's leapfrogged some developed countries technologically and in terms of education over the last 20 years or so. And so that offers, I think, prospect of hope for developing countries that they too could potentially leapfrog and make rapid strides towards economic development and prosperity.
If this kind of competition continues, do you think will this have further influence on the global landscape and also the industrial chains?
It could potentially have negative consequences. The more rapidly we seek to develop a technology without considering perhaps the side effects or the potential unintended consequences, the more dangerous it becomes. So I think what we really need is to have greater transparency and accountability transnationally. I think one of the ways in which we can perhaps do this is through promoting a more open source approach rather than proprietary source to the development of AI. I think we really need to collaborate more, because some of the challenges that we face with AI are collective challenges, and I think we need to collaborate together to make sure that AI is safe and well regulated. So I think there's an issue of how we govern AI globally, because if we lose control of AI in one country, I think it will affect lives of people in other countries as well.
From China's perspective, will the sanctions on the AI chips truly stop China's development of AI, or will it otherwise stimulate Chinese companies to make their own independent innovation in the future?
I think in the China case, two things I would say that need to be considered. I think first is that the export controls have led to two types of innovation in China. We have the innovation around DeepSeek, basically showing that you don't necessarily need the most powerful chips to have a highly functioning large language model. You can have much more energy efficiency and all of those sorts of things. So that's perhaps one indication of innovation. You know, necessity is the mother of invention, as we say in English, that there's a response to the export control by innovating to have greater sort of efficiency of compute. And there's also a spur to China to develop its own chips, for example, that would compete with NVIDIA. So you have Huawei is developing more powerful chips. And so the export ban may be affected from the United States, but from the perspective of the United States, it also might be counterproductive in the sense that it may well spur innovation. And I think it's too early to tell, but there are signs, certainly in terms of DeepSeek and Huawei, that the Chinese response has been one of innovation to the export controls.
How has the application of AI across different industries affected the labor force market?
Historically, whenever we've had new technologies, there has been some displacement of jobs. But the technology has led to productivity gains and increases in national income. So increased demand for other types of jobs. So there's a process of what's called creative destruction. I think it's likely that there'll be some sort of job displacement in those areas, but if AI leads to increases in national income, that will create demand for other jobs that perhaps we don't even know exist at the moment. So the overall process in terms of employment is likely to be positive if AI leads to an increase in national income, but there will be some sort of transitional impacts where all jobs will be changed. You know, there may be higher productivity in certain areas and a reduced need for labour in certain sectors.
Although China leads the world in a number of AI-related companies, especially startups, but those companies still face very fierce competition in the world and also the financial pressures. What kind of policies do you think the government can adopt to help and protect these companies and also prevent risks of like market bubble?
There are a number of things that states can do internationally. One of the things that AI or large language models need is a lot of compute power, which means lots of powerful chips. It's important that states invest in the production of chips, for example, because that's one of the prerequisites for developing an AI industry. Then I think there are lots of issues to do with the hardware and software of AI. I also think the state has a role to play in regulating the private sector. It may not be such a good idea, for example, a relatively small number of firms have such a dominant position in the market. That sort of oligopoly may discourage fair competition. So I think the state has a role to play in ensuring that the market works. I also think that the state has a role in regulating AI and perhaps encouraging certain sorts of models of development rather than others. So for example, one of the interesting things in China is that China has tended to support an open source approach rather than the proprietary approach to AI. I personally am a supporter of this because I think that it's that the open source approach allows for greater transparency and checking and auditing of how AI is working. Often startups come from universities, so I think that there's a role to play in state supporting the transition from people becoming students or graduate students or PhD students to becoming entrepreneurs. More generally, there's just an obligation of the state to try and mitigate the potential negative consequences of AI. So for example, one of the issues to do with AI is that it may have negative environmental consequences because of the use of large amounts of energy in data centers. And also I think we need even greater investment in renewable technologies in order to provide clean power or cleaner power for the AI industries, generally speaking. So I think the state has a role in trying to ensure that AI doesn't make us more unequal as societies, but leads to greater equality. So we really need active states here rather than leaving it to the free market, I would suggest.